Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, host Casey Hentges has an iris with foliage as bold as its blooms. We traveled to Reiman Gardens on the campus of Iowa State University to find out how All-America selections are trialed and to stroll through their fantastic butterfly house. Casey builds a butterfly house to decorate the garden, and OSU Entomologist Eric Rebek updates us on the monitoring of Japanese beetles in Oklahoma.
We have a beautiful iris that's showing off here at OSU's campus that I want to introduce you to. This is Iris pallida, cultivar variegata, and you can see how it's got its name. Obviously it has this lovely variegated foliage that has more of a yellow and green variegation to it. The plant itself will get to be about 2 to 3 feet tall, and it's topped with these lovely soft purple flowers in the springtime. Now this iris has a yellow beard and is a parent to the tall bearded iris hybrids. The nice thing about this particular one being variegated is when it's done blooming, you still have the foliage to add interest to your garden. But it's also known as a sweet iris, and you can tell that by the sweet smell that it has. It almost, some people say, smells like Kool-Aid a little bit. This iris prefers moist, humus, well-drained soil. It can handle some shade, but performs best in full sun. Try this iris in your garden next spring. This season we've talked a lot about All-America selection, and we are a display garden at the Botanic Garden at Oklahoma State University. But today we're actually on the campus of Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa at Reiman Gardens, which is the site of a trial gardens for AAS. And joining me is Jesse Liebenguth, who is an indoor horticulturist here, and you're also on the board of directors.
I am.
Right, for the AAS. So can you tell us a little bit about your trial gardens here?
Sure. So we have 3 of the 4 different trial opportunities. So we have ornamental seeds, we have edibles, and we have herbaceous perennial trials. So we have everything from flowers to perennials to tasty herbs and vegetables.
So you're doing all of the trialing here. And the difference between the trialing and the display garden is we get the end product to grow out, but you guys are the ones making those assessments.
Yep. So there's lots of us that are horticulturalists, either breeders, people at public gardens, people at private sites, and we are all independent judges. We don't get any bribes. We're not told what belongs to who, and so we give everything a blind feedback, and we find out from there what's good and what's better.
Right. So about how many edibles are you growing this season for us?
We have 30 different entries, approximately, and so each entry has also between 1 to 3 different comparisons. So we're growing about 90 different plants.
Okay. And the comparisons are so that you know that it's an improved, potentially for the new one that you're trialing.
So there might be similar colors, similar flavors, similar types. You might have a sweet bell pepper being trialed against other sweet bell peppers. We have habaneros and poblanos in trials this year, so it's just a lot of peppers, a lot of salsa making throughout the year.
I was going to say, so there is one perk, right?
There is.
So you guys are actually trialing it, and what are you reporting on? I mean, is it about the germination rate, or how they taste, or everything in between?
It's pretty much everything from start to finish. We do a germination score. We also get notes about what the breeders are highlighting, so what they're saying is better about these plants. Better flavor is obviously something that has to happen because nobody wants a really beautiful tomato that is mealy and gross.
Right.
So we just get the notes. We're making notes about, yes, they said this germinates earlier, and it does. This produces a pepper 2 weeks before any of the entries. So.
Okay, so now, and you guys are in a different region than what we are in Oklahoma. You're in the Heartland region?
We're in the Heartland region, yep.
So obviously there's going to be some regional winners that are specific to you guys here that we won't necessarily see, but on the national level, some of what's going to come out of this might be things that we find in our display garden
that we'll send you guys.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent. So what are you in the process of? It looks like you're a little behind us with the seasons.
We are, yep, because it's cold here, it's colder. So we're doing a lot of transplanting right now. So I've got some volunteers here today, and they're helping me. We seeded peppers probably about a month ago, and they sat on our mist bench, and so now we're getting them off the mist bench, bumping them up, letting them know that it's time to take off and grow, giving them some good fertilizer so that we can get them planted out in about 6 or 7 weeks.
All right, so we're lucky we're going to get to plant pretty soon, sooner than you guys will. But how long does it last in the garden here for you, and at what point do you turn in your reports on this stuff?
So data is usually due about the 1st of October.
Okay.
There's every so often, especially if something's a later crop like a winter squash or maybe a Brussels sprout, the breeder can say that they would like a later data, which might push their introduction as a winter date back. But if they're not going to be ready until after October 1st, then they want a fair shake at it. So everything stays in the garden until at least October 1st. Data comes in, and sometimes it kind of just depends on what kind of time and volunteers you have and what kind of season you have.
Yeah.
If we get a hard frost and things look pretty bad the first part of October, things will come out. But as long as things are producing tomatoes and peppers that we can harvest to donate, then we usually leave them in.
Just like you would do in your garden, basically. And so, again, you mentioned donating some of the produce. Is that what you do, or what happens with all the produce?
We have another group of volunteers, and some of our summertime employees go out once a week at least and harvest all the produce and donate it to Plant a Row for the Hungry, which is a program through the Garden Writers Association. So they weigh everything, they clean anything up that's really muddy, and then they'll divide it up between several different programs here in Ames and Story County.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for sharing this, Jessie, and giving us a little insight into the trial side of AAS.
Thanks.
The Christina Reiman Butterfly Wing at the Reiman Gardens in Ames, Iowa. And joining me is Erin Stile, who is the assistant director here. And Erin, you've got both tropical and native butterflies in here. What kind of goes into maintaining this?
Well, this is a USDA regulated facility because it has exotic species in it. And we get shipments of butterflies in the pupa or chrysalis state once a week from suppliers from around the globe. We bring those in, we put them in special conditions to get them to emerge, and once they emerge, they come in here and greet visitors.
So you're doing this throughout the year, right?
Yes, we are here year-round with this facility, which is really nice, especially in the middle of winter.
Right, it's so nice to come in here. I feel like I'm in a tropical paradise. We've got blue morphus floating around and all sorts of butterflies. We've got a few long wings as well, it seems like. Are there certain ones that you like for certain reasons, or? You
know, there are certain varieties and butterflies that we have in here year-round. Things like the blue morpho we have here often. We also have a butterfly that's relatively large. It looks like a white monarch. It's called a giant wood nymph. Wow. And those are some of my favorites because they're so big and easy to spot. But we actually have permits for over 1,000 different butterflies. And so anytime you come here throughout the year, you'll find new and different butterflies.
So what all goes into making sure that they stay in here? I know the USDA has has some regulations that you have to follow. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we want to make sure they don't get out on the visitors. So there's a vestibule that you pass through, and in that vestibule there are some mirrors to check yourself over, make sure you don't have any hitchhikers on. There are other things in here too. The room is naturally lower air pressure in here, so the wind blows in when you open the door. There's an air curtain, there's netting, and the air handling system is completely contained. It's not shared with the rest of the building, all in an effort to make sure that these insects don't leave.
And you know exactly what's coming in and what's going out.
Yes, they have to keep meticulous records.
And dispose of it properly and that sort of stuff.
Yep, everything that leaves is either frozen for 72 hours or incinerated.
Okay, all right. Well, so let's talk about the plants that you've got in here. Typically, when we think of butterfly gardening, we say you've got to have host and nectar plants.
Right.
But in here,
it's just nectar plants.
Okay.
We don't want to be a host for these little creatures. If we had all of these butterflies laying eggs, we'd be out of plants in 2 weeks. And it's a lot easier for a small little caterpillar to accidentally get out than an adult butterfly. And so we make very sure that we have no host plants in here for them to lay their eggs on. It actually makes the butterflies live a little bit longer too, because a lot of species, once they lay their eggs, they're kind of done with their life cycle. And they never find a place to lay those eggs, so they live a little bit longer. Yeah. So we have a lot of really nice nectar plants that we're trying to give them really good food sources so that they can live as long as possible in there.
And some of them are, a lot of what we recognize as annuals and tropicals. We've got some pentas and things like that.
Yeah, pentas and lantana are some of our favorites to use.
Okay, all right. Well, it's definitely colorful, and it's a nice little winter oasis to come in here.
It is.
And beautiful nonetheless. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Whether you call them butterfly houses or hibernation boxes, you probably have seen something similar to this at your local garden center. They look a lot like bird houses, but instead of having a round opening or a hole, they actually have a slit in there for the butterfly to come in and out of. Now, upon looking at these, we started to investigate a little bit more about how functional they are for butterflies to either overwinter or take shelter in. And we found that according to our entomologists here at OSU, and also according to the North American Butterfly Association, that these butterfly houses are typically not used by butterflies at all. In fact, they just are more garden decorations or ornamentation to put around your landscape. Now, that's not to say that there's not purpose in that itself. They can provide a lot of color if you wanted to paint them, and they add just some whimsy and character into your garden. With that being said, we're going to show you an inexpensive way to make a butterfly house to add some whimsy into your garden. In order to make a butterfly house, we went and purchased a 6-foot tall picket that's got a dog ear top to it. And that's all you're going to need as far as the lumber to construct this. Our first cut we're going to make is going to be the roof of the house, and we're going to measure down 10 1/4 inches from the top of the picket. Now you'll notice that cut we made at a 30-degree angle, and that's so when it's on the roof there it sheds the water and it's still flush with the back of the house. So now we also have the same 30-degree cut on this part, and this is going to be the back of our house, and so we're going to measure down 12 1/2 inches from it, and it will be a straight cut. Now, because we're starting off with a flat cut, our next cut is going to be angled again at a 30-degree, and that's going to be because this is the front of our house, and we've got to compensate for that angle of the roof coming in on it. So this front of the house is going to be 8 3/4 inch long. All right, now that's going to be our front piece, and we might want to set that aside because we're going to need to do more work to build that entrance slot for those butterflies to come into our decorative house. Now our last cut that we made was again on a 30-degree angle, so we don't need that really again. We need a straight cut. So what we're going to do is just flip our board and go to the other end, and at this point we're going to build our sides off of this. So to start out, what we're going to do is measure 9 inches on one side of our board, and we're just going to make a little mark there at 9 inches, and then we're going to measure 12 inches, excuse me, off of that, and so we're about right there. Now on the opposite side of the board, we're going to measure 12, so we're right there. And then we're going to come 9 inches off of that. And so we're right there. So in total, this is 21 inches that we're going to cut. But now between this, we're going to draw a line, and that's the angle that we're going to want to cut. So now that we've got all of our pieces cut, we're going to come back to that front piece that's going to be where we need to put our slit for our butterfly. And since this is about an 8 3/4 inch length piece of wood, we're going to come up and find the middle of it, about 4 inches, and make a mark right there. And what we can do is then come off, we're going to make the whole slit about 3 inches long. So we'll come down 1.5 inches from there, and we'll go up 1.5 inches from there too. We kind of want to put that in the middle, so we're going to need to move that over to right about 2 3/4 inch, and then we will go ahead and from there draw a line. So now that we've got our line to kind of guide us where that opening is going to be, at the bottom we're just going to drill a hole using a 1/2 inch drill bit, and then we're also going to drill a hole at the top of that. So now at this point we've got our 2 end points that are going to guide our slot between them, and just to make sure we try to have more of a straight line, we're going to use the outsides of those holes and draw another line that will guide us, and we'll either use a jigsaw or a routering tool. We're going to use a routering tool today to carve the rest of that out. After we've got our entry for our butterflies cut out, we're going to next drill pilot holes into each of the corners that we're going to then attach to one another. For this particular construction project, we are using 1-inch brass screws, but you could also use galvanized nails or even a nailer with brads. So for $3 and a little time and effort, we built ourselves our own butterfly house. Now, if you're an artist or you have a young child that likes to paint, this is a great way to get creative. You can either leave it natural, but again, add a lot of bright colors on here and add some personality to the garden. If you're looking to attract butterflies though, you're better off sticking with the colorful flowers. We're here at Greenleaf's Hidden Lake site, just outside of Fort Gibson, and joining us today is Dr. Eric Rebek, our extension entomologist. And Dr. Rebek, we're coming out here to look at some research you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. Thanks for having me. So what we have in front of us is a Japanese beetle trap. That trap, it's a what we call a weather vane trap. It has 2 lures in there for attracting these beetles. It's a sex pheromone as well as an aggregation pheromone, kind of calling in those beetles. And after a couple days of leaving it out in the field, we'll open this up in a second and we'll see what our bounty is.
Okay, so before we get into that, before we open this up, let's talk a little bit about the Japanese beetle.
Yeah.
So we're finding it more in eastern Oklahoma versus the rest of the state.
Yes, that's right, because this beetle is actually invading from the east, making its way westward into Oklahoma. It's been with us for about a decade or so now. And this is part of the research to kind of figure out what's happening at that invasion front, where these beetles are moving into new areas. And it's a cooperative project that I'm working on with Dr. David Smitley at Michigan State University, looking for these parasites of Japanese beetle that might be effective in their biological control.
Okay, so are they finding this parasite where it's the beetle is well established already?
Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, some of those areas where it's been well established for a long time, they're having fewer and fewer problems with Japanese beetle, and due in large part to having these parasites and predators and parasitoids kind of working on their populations.
Okay, so in essence, you're kind of tracking the parasite to see if it's here as well.
For this study, that's right.
Okay,
yes,
all right. So Dr. Rebek, is the Japanese beetle a problem for homeowners or for commercial situations? Who is affected by this?
Sure, both actually. The beetle itself, the adults are defoliators, so they feed on leaves, but they also will feed on fruits and vegetables. The larvae are they're white grubs that feed below ground on the roots, and they feed on about 350 to 400 different species of plants. And so any of these scenarios, homeowners, vineyards, peach orchards, cornfields, these can all be susceptible to the beetle.
Okay, and so do you recommend for people to trap for them, or?
Depends on the situation.
Okay.
Obviously, we're using these for this research study that we're doing. They can be useful for monitoring, especially in a very sensitive crop like peaches or in grapes, where if you get any damage from their feeding on that fruit, it's lost marketability. So it's a good way to monitor and then determine when you want to spray. Homeowners, I don't recommend using these because what they end up doing is attracting more beetles than you would have in the landscape in the first place.
Okay, that's not a good idea.
Not at all.
So I know they're related to the white grubs and the green June beetle. So do we need to treat them as a grub, or do we wait and treat them as an adult?
Well, if they're a problem in your turf grass, yes, you can treat them then,
Okay.
because they are damaging the roots of those turf grasses where you might find them. But in terms of managing the adults, that's the wrong way to do it, because you're only treating what's in the immediate vicinity. As you might be seeing, a lot of them are coming in, flying around.
There's one right
on my
there,
arm
yeah.
right now. So they're very strong flyers, and they really do come in from miles around. And so just treating on the property, just for those white grubs, really isn't going to put a dent in your control of the adult population.
Okay, all right. And lastly, what do we treat these beetles with if we need to?
Sure. For the adult management, when it comes to insecticides, we're primarily dealing with broad spectrum chemicals, contact insecticides that are going to provide a quick knockdown. A lot of these are available to homeowners over the counter. Things like Sevin can be used. A wide variety of your kind of general multi-insect killer type of pesticides can also be used for their management. Commercial growers in a vineyard, for instance, they're going to have a lot more at their disposal, a lot more options. But again, for managing the adults, we're primarily talking about those broad spectrum contact insecticides, no matter where we're dealing with this pest.
So Dr. Rebek,
Yeah.
when should we be looking for the adult Japanese beetle in our garden?
Yeah, so the adults are emerging and flying peak of the growing season, so we're going to find them late June into early July, all the way into early to mid-August.
All right. Well, shall we see what we have in
Yeah,
here?
let's crack open the
Should we
trap
knock
here and
this
see.
one
Sure, knock
right
that one in
All
there.
right,
There it
okay.
goes. All right. So you just hold that bag open for me there.
And it sounds like we might have a bee in
And we
there,
might have a
too.
bee in there. It could also be a green June beetle. They also make a ruckus. And it's a bee.
There's a lot in there.
There are a lot in there.
All right.
All right.
So now that we've got them, what are you going to do with these?
We'll bring them back to the lab, transport them on ice, and we'll put them in the freezer to kill them all. And then I'll package them up. I'll put them in a saline solution, freeze that. Everything will be frozen, shipped frozen to the lab up in Michigan State, where when they're ready to get at them, they'll start dissecting the beetles and looking for those parasites on the inside.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Rebek. We appreciate you sharing your research with us.
Thanks for having me once again, Casey.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, a beautiful Oklahoma-proven vine crosses our path. Casey takes care of our azaleas. We have turf tips for June. And we make another stop in Ames, Iowa, at a bank that we wouldn't have believed if we hadn't seeded ourselves. We hope you join us then for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.